Weyburn City Council held here at the council chambers, 5 p.m. Monday, December 11th, 2017. To start with a quote that I found, it says, "The future belongs to those who prepare for it today." And that was by Malcolm X. And there's the whole idea is that we'll carry that theme through as we start preparing for the future of Weyburn. 2018 is soon upon us, and we have to prepare and think about what 2018 is going to hold for us. And with that, there's a lot of different changes to our bylaws as we prepare for that future. The first thing on the the first thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting and the strategic planning priorities meeting held November 27th, 2017. Do you have a motion, please?
I'll make that motion, Your Worship, that we accept the minutes.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Are there any additions to the agenda?
Your Worship, just with respect to the public hearing or public meeting with respect to the development bylaw, we will be dealing with that under item 8A when we get to that point of the agenda.
Public hearing? Okay. Any other additions? If no further additions, can I have a motion?
Your Worship, I'll make a motion to add those additions to the agenda.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. There are no public hearings and notices. There's no original communications, delegations, or petitions. First thing, reports to council. We have one from the Parks Board by Councillor Chessel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our November Parks meeting was November 28th, and we discussed Trails Day. The Park Board will form a subcommittee to plan for the 2018 Trails Day. Plan is to incorporate more vendors, crafts, performers. We're tentative date booked for June. We're looking at a couple dates, just depending on what's going on in the community, so more to come there. Winterfest, Parks Coordinator Linda Procott provided the park or the board with a handout of different activities we're looking, depending on how the weather deals with us this February Family Day for Winterfest, so there'll also be more to come on that. The River Park entrance feature, funds for the entrance feature have been included in the 2018 preliminary budget, along with the resurfacing of 500 meters of the Signal Hill Trail. The Opportunity Road Race, which was held back in June, there's 110 participants in total, ages ranging from 5 to 70. It was a great success. The committee brought a $5,000 check, which I believe was just received to the city, and that is for future development and in basically doing work on our paths for us, which is great. To Tagua calendar, the Weyburn Review said the calendars are ready in a day or two, which is now passed, so they are available for sale at City Hall here. Great calendar, come check them out. SUPCA update. Claude Morin attended the SUPCA annual general meeting in Saskatoon. It was a review of the past year's initiative, and the executive was chosen. They will meet again actually in Weyburn this year in 2018, March of 2018. And some other great news, we received 5 blooms this year from the Communities in Bloom judges, which is up from last year where we received 4 blooms, and this is the highest rating in blooms we can achieve. We also received a certificate of achievement for having participated in both the provincial and national Communities in Bloom program for the past 12 years. And we will again go under the Evaluated Friends category. Then the meeting was adjourned, and next meeting is January 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Chessel. The next one, Police Commission by Councillor Van Betju.
Thank you, Your Worship. The regular meeting of the Weyburn Police Commission was held in the Administrative Boardroom on Tuesday, November 28th. First item on the agenda was Chief Pritchard congratulated Inspector Rod Stafford on his appointment as Deputy Chief, and the media was present to take the picture. Under reports, Chief Pritchard presented the mayor's report for the month of October. In comparison to the same month of 2016, crimes against person increased by 3, crimes against property decreased by 19, and total calls for service increased by 25. Chief Pritchard then provided his verbal report. Accounts payable report for October was presented. Councillor Van Betju inquired of the gala expenses, and Chief Pritchard advised that they had revenue due to sponsorships, tickets, liquor sales, etc., and will be donating the excess funds to victim services and the family place. Unfinished business. Chief Pritchard advised that since the October meeting wherein the board approved the 2018 budget proposal, there have been minor changes, but the final percentage increase-decrease remains the same. The board took this as information and no resolution due to no change from the budget number presented at the October meeting. Under new business, 2017 budget expenditure, Chief Pritchard asked that the board pass a resolution to transfer the remaining funds from the Rides on Us grant in the amount of $6,900 be moved to the 2018 budget to continue with the program. The chief also asked that the board approve transferring $12,000 of the unspent budget dollars to facilitate the training for an identification officer that wasn't used in 2017 to the 2018 budget year. The chief requested approval for unbudgeted purchase of a newer used vehicle to a value of $25,000 for the CIU. Councillor Van Betju inquired why someone didn't end up going to the training, and the Chief Pritchard advised the person that was sent was unable to complete the training. Mayor Roy inquired if someone else could go instead, and Chief Pritchard advised he has not identified anyone to date. Don Newman inquired if someone could be contracted from Regina or somewhere as an identification officer, and the chief didn't feel there would be any cost saving in doing it this way, but did add that they would share with Estevan when in a pinch. In regard to the purchase of newer used vehicle requests, Councillor Van Betju inquired what they have now, and the chief advised the van that they had purchased from SGI for $1, and the equipment installed was purchased with grant funding and now must mount the equipment in the new vehicle. There is $10,000 put away for the CIU vehicle right now, and so would use $15,000 out of the budget. Rob Stephenson asked that the board be provided with the options and quotes on the CIU vehicle prior to the purchase, and the chief advised he would send out all tenders received to the board. Next date of the next meeting is December 18th at 3 p.m.
Thank you. With that, we will make note that these reports have been received and they shall be filed. Our consent agenda, utility report, for October 2017. Do you have a motion?
Your Worship, I believe this is the one. Your Worship, I'd like to make the motion that the items in the consent agenda be accepted as presented.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
And that is, we have our cash activity report and also the taxation collection report. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Motions. Accounts payable.
Your Worship, I'd like to make the motion that the purchases in the amount of $927,891.99 from November 24th, 2017 to December 6th, 2017 be passed for payment.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. The 2018 fuel and fluids tender. Mr. Hardy, just go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report which Council received was that both a two-part tender for fuel and fluids was submitted. Total of 10 submissions were received, which is 4 for both Part A and Part B and 6 for Part B alone. The report identifies the costs and that with respect to the numbers that were there, the excuse me, the recommendations are that Part A fuel be awarded to Prairie Sky Cooperative as their bid was lowest and met all the tender requirements, and Part B fluids also be awarded to Prairie Sky Cooperative as their bid was lowest amongst the bids that met the tender requirements. And note that there was one tender, one bid that did not meet requirements under Part B, and therefore the staff are recommending are making the recommendation as stated.
Well, Your Worship, I'll make a motion that the bid of Prairie Sky Cooperative for the supply of fuel in the amount of $273,903 and fluids in the amount of $17,560.92 to the City of Weyburn for the term of January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2019 be accepted as presented.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Water treatment plant chemical supply tender. The update on that one?
On September 27th, 2017, Council made a resolution to award the 2018 chemical supply of potassium permanganate to Univar Canada Limited at a rate of $4.84 per kilogram. Univar has since retracted their bid price of $4.84, and they've indicated that there was an error in converting US dollars to Canadian dollars, and that the potassium permanganate's actual price was $5.32 per kilogram. So it is recommended that the 2018 chemical supply quotation from Brenntag Canada Inc. for potassium permanganate be accepted at a rate of $5.0883 per kilogram.
Discussion?
Your Worship, I'll make a motion that the 2018 chemical supply quote from Brenntag Canada Inc. for the supply of potassium permanganate to the water treatment plant in the amount of $5.0883 per kilogram be accepted.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. We move into introduction of bylaws. We have our development levy bylaw, and at this point in time, would you wish to speak to it, Mr. Hardy?
Thank you, Your Worship. The bylaw, which is presented to Council tonight and is in front of for public discussion, is one that, in terms of its general directions, ensures that the amount of that is being requested for development levies reflects a decreased amount from what was passed in 2013, 2013 with respect to this bylaw, as a result of our growth requirements being adjusted, and as well, basically the bylaw has gone through and received comments from the chamber and from other interested parties, and has been a full discussion with council. The key elements to put in front of council is that this development bylaw is geared to two types of developments. One is definitely greenfield developments, and in terms of the redevelopments of existing properties, which will intensify the use at that location. That's the focus of where bylaws, the development bylaws should be and continue to be, and makes a distinction between how greenfields and existing intensifications on existing developments are being made. Thank you, Your Worship.
With that, is there any discussion? Is there anybody within the audience that wishes to speak to this? Mr. Maloney, if you would come forward, please, and state your name.
Yeah, my name is Pat Maloney. Council, I just got a couple of questions, mostly for my own curiosity. I'm looking at section 7 in the definitions and the net hectare per acre. and I just find it a little bit ambiguous, or maybe there's a bit of a verbiage issue here. I guess my question is, it deals with dedicated lands, but it doesn't discuss vested lands at all. Is it the intention of this bylaw that the levy be applied to vested lands, which would include all streets and lanes being created inside a subdivision? And if that is the case, then I think the word "as" is missing, where it should say excludes any land dedicated as public utility parcels, municipal or environmental reserve parcels. So I guess I'd like some clarification on, is it gross area of the entire project, or is vested land exempted?
Mr. Hardy, any comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. The question is valid in that the word "as" should be included within the two.
Very good. Thank you, thank you for that. Second point?
Okay, so that being the case, then the levy is applied to vested lands as well?
That is correct.
Okay. That's because even I'm finding 6A1 a little ambiguous, because again, it can be interpreted probably either way, where it says new developable lots and parcels shall be charged servicing based on the number, but then it's got the kicker of all lands affected by the subdivision. So again, I wasn't sure if that was gross area or just the saleable fee simple area.
Gross. It's gross.
Gross. Okay. Two other little things. In number 11, severability. I think the word "than" should be replaced with the word "then." If a section is ruled invalid or void, then such provision should be struck, and the rest of the bylaw is good. And finally, under enactment, I question whether this bylaw could take effect after third reading, because in fact, I believe this type of bylaw requires ministerial approval. So I think this will have to go to the province before it can take effect.
Your Worship.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Those two corrections are noted, and yes, this does as an amendment to a development charges bylaw require ministerial approval. So council can provide third reading, and then there has to be ministerial approval for it to be enacted.
And how long does that usually entail?
As long as it takes the ministry to look at it, but generally it's a relatively quick process if we provide them with the necessary information and the costing used to come to the acreage, the hectare charge.
Mr. Richards.
Well, first off, thank you very much, Mr. Maloney, for your attention to that. I guess the question to the city manager then, does number 12 need to be reworded to include upon ministerial approval?
Yes, what council has the ability to do is to pass second and third reading as amended by council. If council puts forward those amendments and directs the clerk to make those changes and then passes a motion to make those changes prior to second and third reading, then we can do that and we can move forward.
Do you wish to make those?
I'm just waiting to see if anybody
No.
on the topic first.
Mr. Van Bitch.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't seem to find what I was looking for, but in one part of the bylaw, it speaks to a per lot charge. Is that a residential lot or a commercial lot?
It can apply to either. Again, the circumstances, each of these is being dealt with on a case-by-case basis, and looking at the size and the scope of the development. I think that allows the development officer and council some flexibility in terms of how they look at this. But generally, the per lot is used as a point, a fraction of an acreage lot or a fraction of an acre lot, and in some cases, some developments are going to be small, and it will be easier to provide, it will be easier to use the per lot charge as opposed to some that are large and will require use. Some commercial properties may require use on a larger or a smaller scale, so we have not specifically identified them or the circumstances under which those two can be used. Again, it does depend upon what at the end of the day, whether it's greenfield or not, and whether or not there's an intensification or not, and what portion of a lot may be intensified.
All right, so the per lot charge is not likely to apply to commercial property?
Not as likely, but may under certain circumstances.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Richards?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just a point of clarification, Councillor Van Betcher. We did, that math that you're seeing in there is broken out on 1/5 acres.
Yeah.
Right? So it's an average like that per lot charging is 5 lots per acre is sort of the math that's used in there.
Okay, which would be typical for residential.
Yeah.
Mr. Maloney?
Just one other thing, as a citizen and a taxpayer, I guess I encourage council to make very sure they're confident in their interpretation and the implications of this bylaw. And I'm never a big fan of 3 readings at one meeting. That vote does have to be unanimous, so one dissenting vote to the motion would in fact carry it to the next meeting and give everyone a chance to think about it a little bit. So that's all. Thanks.
And with this one, this is one of those, I'll speak to on one of the points on that, Mr. Maloney. We have long and arduously over the last year discussed this and the changes to the bylaw. There's a good videos out that we hopefully are going to post that will explain what the why the levies are enacted and what they're intended to do, and that will hopefully be soon posted to our websites too. So this is what we're looking at, and we want to move forward, not to hamper development, and to be fair to the people who are out there as what our size and growth of the city is expected to be. Mr. Richards?
Sorry, Your Worship, to keep, but thank you. So just a point of clarification, if I could, from the city manager. You know, even once this bylaw is updated and receives ministerial approval and comes into force, there always is opportunity for a developer to come into City Hall and say, this is my situation. Please help me understand, A, how this development levy will impact my plans, and B, he has the ability, he or she, or the developer, has the ability to sort of say, this is why I think the development levy should be a little bit different for me. And there's structures in place within this to allow for sort of, I don't want to call it an appeal, but you know what I'm asking, I think.
Through your worship, council obviously, as has been noted here, has to be very clear about what its intent is, and therefore, in terms of looking at particular situations, the issue is that in terms of the bylaw, 1, all green fields will be subject to these rates, and 2, where there is identified to be intensification, these rates are to be applied. If we use that as the basis of our discussions, as long as that is not the intent, that is not the standing of the individual coming in and asking for questions, we're more than happy to provide information. At the same time, there is a limit to what we can do. We're not going to, for example, publish a list of what the potential costs are for every developable piece of land within the city and for every conceivable use that could be there. But where a developer has identified both, a location and very clearly define their intended use, we can work with them to be able to provide them with that information. And as long as those principles that we've talked about are not being questioned by the individual involved, they still have the ability to talk to council under certain circumstances. And council may at the same time say, you know, if it doesn't fit those, if you're trying to question those principles, then please don't take the time of council, because we've been very clear about what our intent is with respect to this bylaw.
Does that answer your question?
It does. So we want to make sure that folks understand the implications of this, though, on their properties. Take the time.
Well, as long as they're not kicking tires in every available developable piece of land within the city, because that would obviously be an unexpected burden on staff to be able to do that type of analysis on every lot for every particular type of use. So, in the circumstances of those that are involved in the development industry, they should have a planner who should be able to tell them whether or not there's an intensification required, and not necessarily be dealing with staff on those particular issues. Developers do have the ability to get engineering and planning assistance, and it's not necessarily the city staff that are going to be in a position to help them with that decision. They have to make decisions based on good information, but that doesn't mean that staff make the decision for them and convey to them in advance what that decision is.
Mr. Bueller?
Yeah, Your Worship, I do have a couple questions on Section 6, C, item number 2. Any adjustment to the development levy by the Chief Development Officer ad hoc development committee will be based upon the impact of the development on past, current, and future offsite infrastructure needs in accordance to Sections 9 and 10. Is there going to be any clarity to what that actually is? Because we're basically saying that there is a chance to change it or alter it depending on what you're doing on that lot.
Mr. Hardy?
The issue is that it relates to what I said before, that we can't anticipate all of the different uses and therefore be able to provide advanced discussion on every particular circumstance under which we're done. However, it is expected that the decisions of the development officer or the ad hoc committee or council are going to be recorded and used as precedent in terms of setting future pieces. So at the end of the day, this is not where you can indicate in advance what's going to happen for a particular property.
Okay, thank you. That kind of answers my question. So if somebody was to come to the city and they wanted to develop a lot that's considered greenfield and they had a plan in place, they would just come to the city and review it with the city, and at that point it would be determined the impact it would have? No,
in terms of greenfield, they would be, in terms of all greenfield development, they would be responsible for the full costs. It's where we have infill that there would be, that in most circumstances there would be a look at it in terms of if there were certain elements. At the end of the day, greenfield would be responsible for the full cost no matter what. It's in cases of infill where we would use the discretion of looking at the different elements that would be impacted.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Mr. Van Betju?
Thank you for that last point, City Manager Hardy. I think it was important to note that, like I said, it is for greenfield because this is an off-site development levy, so it is basically anything, whether you build a warehouse or an apartment building, it is going to have a cost effect to roads on the offsite to the city of Weyburn. So it's going to add additional costs to our roads, to our recreation, to our sewer, somewhere down the line. It's not going to matter whether you have one toilet there or 10 bathtubs. There is a cost to it. So I think that's very important to note in a greenfield that there is always an off-site cost to it.
Richards.
Yeah, thanks you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Bambecci, although you and I oftentimes are on a different page on this one. I think that that's an important, I just want to drill down on this if you give me a second, because what's been done here in the changing of this, and I would look to the city manager to make sure I get the numbers right, which most assuredly I won't. We've changed the greenfield fee, if that's the term we're going to use. That's going down by a few $1,000s. That per acre charge is going down to about $76,000 an acre. I think was around $86,000 an acre. So that's a $10,000 reduction. But more impacted is that fee when an existing lot is repurposed. That is really what we have addressed in this change, and I think we're pretty comfortable with what we have. But I think it is important to note, as Councillor Bambecci said, that when new land is connected to the city services, there is an expense. It might not be outside the front door of that piece of land.
Any further comments? And also, I would just like to make the comment that a lot of this change from the per acre was dropped by $10,000 per acre was simply because these old levies were set on based on that we were going to double in population size by what was it, by within a matter of about 5 or 10 years, which was a huge, I mean, oversight and by that one report done. The growth rate most certainly was not going to be the 3 to 5% growth rate a year. So there became the statement. So that's why we are doing as such. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to this? Go ahead, if you would come forward and make your statement here. Please state your name.
Chandel Clark. And I'm applying to the existing properties as well. And I just wanted to point out in section 4 that the main thing is that the city manager and his delegate authority to enter into negotiations and service agreements. And in this section, there was also a rule of the 75% or more, and there was a square footage allowance. And I just wanted to point out that that no longer exists. And so that is one thing that a developer could rely on to know that they're not going to have to pay the full acre price. So without that being in there, we are back to the full acre price for existing lots, and then back to the planning. And as a developer in an existing lot, planning does take a lot, and if you're looking for just a base price to know, okay, if this is affordable or not, you have to talk to Roy, and he's able to present something, and I have spoke to him, and I gave him an example, and he wasn't able to provide, and I find it very vague. I'm just looking for something more structured that we can have somewhat of an idea what our values are that we're looking at, and not having to propose something and not knowing where that exactly that is at, and it could be different for various properties. But starting with a base, if you're just looking at a cold storage with nothing more, is there a base price? Okay, at least we know we're here.
Mr. Hardy?
Through you, Your Worship. Again, the fact that if there was, depending on whether the lot being dealt with was a greenfield space or an already existing space that was being used, there would be a difference in terms of the approach that would be used. If it's a greenfield space, that space would be looked at from the standpoint, as was pointed out early, of using the $76,000 per acre area. If that lot, if the space was a very small space and could be considered a lot, then that might allow it to be, you might be able to use this per lot charge. But it depends on how big the lot is, what its use is, and whether or not it is greenfield or it is the intensification of a different area. If this was the case of just putting a fee on one area of a lot that was comprised of many acres, that would be something that we would take a look at. But it does depend on what the development is at the end of the day. So the certainty that I know that developers would like to be able to have isn't here today because because these are the variables that have to be taken into consideration in looking and determining the fee.
Mr. Bishop.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you, Mrs. Clark, for coming forward with this, because we want to make sure we get this right. You know, last time we weren't sure that it was right, so that's why we're reviewing it. So everybody that's come up to talk, thanks for doing this. But I need a little more clarity. So the piece of property you were talking about is
I'm not talking about green space. Like,
yeah,
I'm
you're talking about a
existing.
developed piece of land
Yeah.
that you're looking to repurpose.
Right, and so before there was some reassurance with the square foot price.
Yeah.
That we wouldn't be at that per acre price.
Right.
And with that 75% or less, you'd be able to add on and, you know, benefit your property with no development fee. And so taking those two things out, there's no, you know, you have no idea where you're going to cost at. And when I spoke to Roy about, you know, can you provide me with some examples? Because I think it's very vague listed in here. And there's no example of anything of where you're sitting at for any fees, right? So I understand that there's lots of variables, but there also must have to be something that, you know, a starting point that can help us as developers be able to know where we're going to be at for existing properties that have the water, sewer, curb, whatever it may be there.
Yeah, yeah. Can I keep talking?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know how
You
that
were
works.
going to continue.
Thanks.
I was going to let Mr. Hart, but just before you do that,
Yeah.
Mr. Hardy, can you reply to that statement? Do you have anything more to reply to that or say to that?
I guess what I would say is that if we're talking about a property that is already developed, there is no, if it's a greenfield property, we would look at it. If it was a small lot, we would look at using the per lot charge because there wouldn't be that. But if you're talking about a larger lot that has the potential of developing 3 or 4 more buildings on a particular lot, then I would think we would want to take a look at it being considered for the larger amount.
Mr. Bishop.
Thanks, Your Worship. So do we have to be clear when we're talking about a greenfield lot and we're talking about a previously serviced lot? My understanding
Yeah.
is a greenfield lot would mean there are no services currently to that piece of property. Do I understand that correctly? Maybe I don't.
The greenfield would normally mean that there is nothing developed on it. Not that there are no services there. There are no connections to services. So a greenfield lot would be there are no connections to services. Because that would warrant a development, because that in effect would be a lot on which there is currently no services being used by that lot to all of a sudden where there are services being used and needed. So by taking a lot which has never been serviced, and Councilor, we had this discussion
Yes.
before, that you were very clear in indicating that what we talked about was serviced versus unserviced lots.
Correct.
So if this is an unserviced lot, in other words, has been or is no connection between the main and that property, I would be considering that greenfield.
Yes. And if there was a connection there and the building was torn down 3 years ago, that would not be a greenfield.
That would not be a greenfield, that's correct.
Does that help? Ms. Clark, I'm looking to you to,
Well,
I don't know.
From my understanding, there are some lots out there that have the services in the alleyway or the roadway. So that's technically a service lot.
No, it's not.
No.
No? Okay.
No.
So I'm applying to those ones. The lots that have the services in the roadway, in the alleyway, the main pipes are there. I understand the developer pays to have the services from the main to the building. That's at the developer's cost. But for example, it's not like a huge developer coming in and putting in a whole new subdivision. I understand that's unserviced and that would need the full development fees. But I'm referring to the ones that have service in the alleyways and existing. So I'm not sure what you're classing those as then.
Go ahead, Ms. Wheeler. Or Mr. Van Vetter first, and then Ms. Wheeler.
Sorry, no, I would, the way my understanding, that would be a greenfield, still,
Okay.
Ms. Clark, yeah, because it hasn't had a service brought to that lot, even though the infrastructure is in front of it. But again, and I think the reasoning for that is, again, we're back to, it's not, you're not paying for services to the lot, you're paying for an off-site development fee for the roads coming up to, which I understand, but anyways. I believe that would be a greenfield classification.
Mr. Wheeler.
Yeah, so I'm even more confused now. Because there are lots within the city that are 20-plus years old that have had a road running by them for that full time, and they've had services running in front of them for that full time. And if Mrs. Clark wants to put one washroom in an existing building, it's going to cost her $76,000 in a development fee. I don't think that's that big of a burden on the existing infrastructure. And there is a stark difference between infield and new development, green space or greenfield, because they're not going to put a huge demand on, and they're not extending, or we're not extending the services of the city. So is this an instance where they could actually come in and negotiate and say, we want a 1-inch water service coming in to service one washroom facility? Because realistically, if you base the full development levy, that's not feasible for anybody to do for one washroom. And really, how much of a burden is it putting on our infrastructure?
Mr. Hardy?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Wheeler. I understand where you're coming from. The issue is that lot will have never had any services to draw upon. Okay, so whether you're talking about one washroom or not, the issue is that lot has never paid anything in terms of an upfront charge to get connected to the existing infrastructure, be it a roadway, be it water, be it sewer, be it storm. So the issue is that in terms of those things occurring, part of the off-site development fees are to cover those costs of those services which have already been there and are available beside the lot. Not just the creation of the washroom. The development fee is to cover off the investment that the city has made up until that time for that lot to be able to be serviced. And so there has to be a charge. It's not an incremental charge. There has to be a charge that is made to ensure that it's basically like if I could relate it to it's like a servicing fee. That there's a fee that basically comes on there. Now, if we're talking about a lot, if we're talking about a property that is, smaller in size, it may be that the lot charge would be used as opposed to the per acre charge. But again, it depends on the size of the lot. And so to generally talk about, a lot here is a lot can be 4 acres, or it can be 100 acres, or it can be 1 acre or something which is more sizable, and therefore the development that's going on that lot may not require the same type of off-site fees as one that has the potential of creating a lot of traffic, a lot of intensified use of our existing services. So again, what I'm indicating to you is that the general rule in terms of the greenfield versus the lot per lot cost is one that is not clearly defined. I will agree to that. However, in terms of being able to do this, we do need to get some experience behind it in terms of what's happening. But we also don't want to leave the city starved for revenues when what is going to be there, or what is eventually going to be on there, on that lot, is going to be a draw and requires us as a city to upgrade our services that are off-site. So again, it's not a black and white, Councillor. It's very much a case of depends on what the lot is, where it is, how big it is, and what it's being used for.
Mr. Van Vetter?
So there is an opportunity
It's not
to-
negotiate, by the way. It's not a negotiation. It's a determination by the city of what the fee will be.
Yes, but there is an opportunity for a developer to approach the city and discuss.
Correct. Very
And
much so.
then amongst the two of you, you will determine what the fee would be from there.
Yes.
Thanks for the clarity.
Mr. Van Betchu.
Just a couple things. I know at one point we had a map, and it was all properties within this area. And I don't know if we eliminated that map, or I don't think we've discussed it for the last while, but I know that we did have a map previously that was, it wasn't the core area, but it was, I think we had a map that had existing properties that could be developed, and it was enclosed in that area.
The only, through your worship, the only map that I'm aware of is the one that's used for the Weyburn Builds Fund.
Yeah, no, I think it was previous to...
It's previous to that, okay.
And then my other question, and I'm not sure what the rationale was, that we got rid of the square footage price, so that if you put a 1,000 square foot building on a 1 acre lot, that it would be $12,000 rather than $74,000.
Mr. Chesler.
Was that also still just on infill? That wasn't on green land?
Doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah, from my understanding, green was always 86,000 an acre. Didn't matter what you're building, unless, and I guess was going to be my question for Roy. If I buy 4 acres of land and I'm only building on 1 acre, is that where, not the negotiation, this discussion comes? Can we pay the fee on title for the one lot or for the one building, whatever it may be, and then the other 3 would be exempt until such you decide to build on it?
Mr. Hardy.
To your worship, that is an example of what can be done in putting together a development agreement, and that is possible. In terms of there being an agreement with the city on that, that would certainly be an option that would be there that probably could short circuit a lot of this discussion about the what ifs. That is in that the development agreement can do that. The other piece, of course, is that for those individuals that are into the developing property and sale and resale of property, that becomes an issue to the subsequent buyer if that ends up not being disclosed, which is why within this bylaw, what we're suggesting is when there is a development agreement that is reached, that it is registered on title so that any person obviously subsequently purchasing that lot knows what some of the encumbrances are in the future. But that, again, that may be a way of ensuring that the city's interests are protected, and at the same time, I'll also say there's just as sometimes even equally the value that if somebody is going to buy a property and is going to hold that property for a number of years. I have dealt with other developers who have want to tie themselves into those fees right up front. In which case, the city, if it's developed 20 years from now and there is new infrastructure, you haven't got any money on your investment, to be able to, it does that. So again, this is a bit of a situation where the development agreement, I think, can help these circumstances out in ensuring that when a development does occur on a larger piece of land and it's considered greenfield or infill, that, those things could be documented, put on file, and put on title, so that the city doesn't end up being come back by any subsequent owner of the property saying, well, I didn't know this was the case.
Mr. Van Betchu.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the square footage price was whether it was greenfield or infill on the previous agreement. But yeah, I know of instances where we applied it, yes.
Mr. Mickle.
Thank you, Worship. It's clouded up a bit, but I think I can break through it and see sunshine. This bylaw, manager, Roy, doesn't paint everything with the same brush, and it's hard to do that, I understand that. The reason in the intent of this council was to make sure that we did not chase away development, and I think everybody agrees to that. And I heard a conversation say that if there's a situation, you come in and talk to our manager and we will look at it. Mrs. Clark, thank you for coming and bringing that to our attention. That happened before, maybe it was ignored, but we cannot do that any longer. There's people that want to come to our community, and to make a bylaw to address every issue is almost impossible. It can't be done. That's why we have a manager and administration staff to handle these situations. If the word gets out, if you have frustration, to phone a different counselor and do that, that's great, but the message has got to come from one individual, and that would be administration, to make it clear. It's happened before in 2013 where it wasn't clear and we had organized confusion. I think we can accomplish this with the second and third reading this evening. Let's get this thing going. Let's get clarity from the ministry to make sure it's feasible, it's workable, and let's move forward.
Mr. Jessel?
Your Worship, I guess from even going years back for what myself and Councillor Richard worked on, coming from our working on the chamber perspective, it was never about the 86,000 acre as much as it was as the square footage for building an addition, taking a 30-year-old lot that had a building knocked down. That was the biggest complaint coming from the community, was that. So we've addressed that issue, and that seemed to be the major issue. As Mayor Roy had mentioned, we dropped $10,000, which was due to the fact that our growth isn't going to double over the next year. So we did work on that number a little bit. I know we sometimes, I think me and Jeff and Roy agree to disagree on a few things, but overall, I think I believe we did a great job. There's still going to be some work, and that's why too. It was ready for review. Came up for review from 13. Should have happened in 16. Took us a little time to make it happen, but as we've discussed, it'd be great to review it again before we're out of council again. So,
Mr. Richard?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I also, as much as we're sort of throwing everything at the city manager's way, he is doing what we asked him to do. We asked him to rewrite this, and we've gone around this thing for 16 hours here, I think, in council. So he is doing a pretty good job. But we do still have to answer to Ms. Clark's issue that we have to make sure, city manager, that when a potential development is on the table, that we are able to, with good planning, if the developer is able to say, look, this is our plan, that we can, within a reasonable amount of time, give them a pretty clear perception of what their development levy, and I agree with Councillor Van Betsch when he says we probably need to think of a different name for this thing than a development levy, because sometimes that comes across as a cost for doing good things, and we don't want ever to have that kind of a fee. But I think we have to be responsive to the developer, particularly, and Councillor Chesler hit the nail on the head when he said, I don't know that anybody was ever terribly concerned about that $86,000 or $76,000 for an acre of land being brought into the city. It's when you're repurposing, and we had the big square footage fee on there, right? We have found, and I think I can speak when I say through some of the examples we've given the city manager over the last 3 or 4 months as he's developed this, that development levy wouldn't apply to most of those projects now. Most of those projects wouldn't get a fee if they're kind of repurposing an old lot that's been, unless you're going, from a warehouse to a 7-story apartment building, well then for sure there will be. But largely you won't see an increase. But we owe you a better answer, Mrs. Clark, than I think what you've got. So I would ask that you come back to the city with your detailed plans and sit with us as we try to figure out what those fees would be.
Okay, and I can do that. I just want to clarify, because I've heard a few times that this per lot, but it won't apply to commercial, he said, and ever be $0. Where in this bylaw is the per lot? Where does it refer to the per lot? Because I didn't see it in there.
It is within this book, or within this page 37, but it's 10, it's 9C, the per lot equivalent.
Okay, and you said that won't apply to commercial?
No. What I said was it generally would not, but under certain circumstances.
So it may apply to commercial? Okay. And then I guess, yeah, I just kind of want to sum up that you guys, the city manager is willing to work with the developers, which is great to hear, and I'm not doubting that he will. But for the determination, they must have some sort of formula or something where he's going to get this number from, and I would just like to see it more listed in the bylaw more clearly, I guess.
Mr. Bailey first.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. I think we go back to this whole development thing. What I felt was really unfair was two things. When there was no infrastructure extra needed to add on to a building where we had $12.22 on that, I've personally seen several businesses not expand because of those dollars incorporated. And so you can argue, well, they still have to service the roadways and everything, and I think that's a price the city has to pay because I think it's a minute price of service. We need the taxation on that addition. That's the important part. But when it comes to off-site developments or the levy, whatever you want to call it, on new development, totally support it. We've adjusted our number. So when your situation, ma'am, when you look at that, please come and talk to Roy about it, because I don't want to get into details of what you're doing or what you're proposing to do. But the door is open in this council. The door is open with our city manager to come and have those discussions. And it's discussions, not negotiations. And I think the meat of this bylaw as it is written today will give us that guideline and a benchmark to go by. I think it's in there. So I don't know, Yes,
that's good. Mr. Van Betju?
I think we've done a good job on what we've done so far, but I don't think it is complete, and I will not support the passing of the motion tonight for that, because I think there is more work. It's too ambiguous as it stands right now. There's just too many ifs, ands, or buts yet, so I'm afraid that I would have to say that I will not support it.
Mr. Richards.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, I'm kind of feeling the same, and I think I'm very glad you came to the microphone, because some stuff that I think we as councillors maybe think we know, or we do know, aren't clear in here. That math that's up there, in, I think it's not, is it 9? Yeah, section 9, sort of B and C, that's what they're going to use, Mrs. Clark, to sort of do that determination, right? Those are the figures. So if you tear down a house, put up a house, there's no water charge on there, for example, right? Because that's the. But you wouldn't know that. There was no way we would expect that you would understand that, I guess. So a couple of things, we probably need to maybe do a little bit of better writing around that so that folks would understand it maybe more clear. I'm sort of leaning towards what Councillor Van Betju said too. I think we need to go back and have one more edit on this. And I can't believe I'm saying that, Your Worship, but because I really wanted this as a Christmas present, but.
Mr. Hardy, your comments, please, on that.
Well, certainly I appreciate the extra input and that has come into here, and I have no problem with taking council's direction on this. I would suggest that in terms of the intent that council has, that we give this a second reading, and then direct staff to come back with a third reading with these amendments that have been rightly so suggested in place, and then to provide a little bit more verbiage on section 9 with respect to how these may be applied, and then hopefully we'll be there, and council will be ready to go. I mean, the discussion still has been good, because we've redefined what those principles are. We've talked about the elements of what considered, greenfield versus service lots, and we'll clean up that. We'll make adjustments so that it's very clear in terms of those elements, and put it up to just making a part of making good legislation for this, a good bylaw for the city.
Mr. Bailey?
Thank you, Your Worship. I like that proposal. I would like to see, we've got a very good clarification on residential property there, and if we had something similar on the commercial side of it, would really clarify to not only council, but for our construction people of where we're at. Here it is, it's written black and white, and there is nobody that wants this to pass more than myself, I guarantee that, around this table, but I'm willing to wait until January to have a clear scope of where we're going on this, and if it means passing the second reading and that can be done, I'm okay with that, but it needs to be, if it's taken us a year to get here, what is another month?
No.
I really anticipate in getting it right, and I believe Pat Maloney spoke to that too, is are we understanding it? And I think as a councillor, we would understand it more complete with that clarification in for the new to the old, especially in the commercial.
Your Worship, I'd like to point out too, just, Roy did bring, 15, 20 different examples. So, but it's everyone seems to be different. So we get to throw in another twist, which is great, because we do want to make this right. We don't want to have to say, oh, we missed that, or geez, we skipped out on that. So we do want to make this right. And yeah, I agree. If we read it for a second time, and then, as Dick said, we'll wait a year. It's only a month away. So
That's next year, I think you said.
Is that all you wish to say?
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you for your input on
Thank you.
this. We appreciate that. Is there anybody further? There's no further public discussion. Any further discussion here? Mr. Richards?
With that being said, Your Worship, I'd like to move that bylaw 2017-3365, being the development levy bylaw for the city of Weyburn, be read a second time.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Okay. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? There's no opposition. So we'll come back for a third reading on January the 9th. January 8th? January 8th. Next year. January 8th, 2000. Stay tuned. Our next one. Our next one, bylaws, our snowmobile bylaw. Mr. Hardy.
Your Worship, I will just say that the weather has been cooperating very well with council in
As
terms
we
of
develop this
in
snow
giving
thing.
us the time to get this right. However, after having, thank you, after having consultations with the local snowmobile club, I feel confident that this can go forward to council with the inclusion of the map and the discussions that have taken place, and that we have a bylaw that is ready to go for adoption by council.
And it was just a note to the audience at home that Councillor Chessel excluded himself for a conflict. So there's only myself and the 5 other council members here with this bylaw. Do you have a reading, please?
I do, sure do, Your Worship. I'm prepared to make a motion that bylaw 2017-3369, to be known as the City of Weyburn Snow Law Bylaw, providing regulations and access for snowmobile operations in city limits, be read a second time.
Do you have a seconder? Mr. Van Bettger?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously.
Thank you, Worship. This is proposed to make a motion that the bylaw 2017-3369 to be known as the City of Weyburn Snowmobile Bylaw, providing regulations and access for snowmobile operators in the city limits be read the third time and passed.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Second by Mr. Bailey. Discussion? Called to question. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Yeah. We then, very good. So the snowmobile bylaw is passed, and we now have new trails set up within our bylaw. And we are just ready for the snow, which is supposed to come next year. Yes. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Next. The bylaw 2017-3370, the refuge bylaw amendment. Mr. Hardy.
I'll defer to the assistant engineer on this one to give a short, brief summary.
On November 13th, 2017, Weyburn City Council made a resolution to adopt the City of Weyburn landfill detailed 5-year plan. And one of the action items recommended as part of the 5-year plan is to update the landfill tipping fees. So Sperling Hansen provided a break-even tipping fee in the range of $80 per ton to cover the long-term costs of the landfill facility. And it's been proposed by city staff and Tom Williams of Walker Projects that the landfill tipping fee be increased gradually over a multi-year period to ease the impact to landfill users. The current rate by ton for waste disposal is $46, and the proposed rate by ton to be implemented January 1st, 2018 is $60. And this rate is also proposed to increase again in 2020 and 2022 to $75 and $85 respectively. And based on a review of tipping fees from other Saskatchewan communities, a $60 tipping fee is comparable to an average tipping fee rate. And the monthly environmental fee and monthly landfill decommissioning fee charged on all water and sewer utility bills is currently $4.45 and 60 cents respectively. And these fees are proposed to increase to $4.75 and 75 cents respectively in 2018. So it is recommended that the city amend bylaw 2011-3188 and enact bylaw number 2017-3370 for regulating the collection and removal or disposal of solid waste and other refuse.
Mr. Hardy?
Through your worship, I would just say that we are doing this in the interest of coming into budget season. The current bylaw is going to be subject to review during 2018, and staff will be making other recommendations with respect to this bylaw in terms of its contents and ensuring that our bylaw is up to standards.
And a lot of those are, I believe, are in regards to what can allowable to be in there, no oils, no such, so that we are progressing forward to make sure we have a healthy and safe refuge pile for the city. Any further discussion? Mr. Van Betju?
I have a motion, Your
Oh, the
Worship.
motion. Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that bylaw 2017-3370 to amend rates in Schedule A of City of Weyburn Refuge bylaw 2011-3188 be read a first time.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Any further discussion? At that point, call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously.
Your Worship, I have a motion that bylaw 2017-3370 to amend rates in Schedule A of City of Weyburn Refuge bylaw 2011-3188 be read for a second time.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously.
Your Worship, I have a motion that bylaw 2017-3370 to amend rates in Schedule A of City of Weyburn Refuge bylaw 2011-3188 be given 3 readings at this meeting.
second, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously.
Your Worship, I have a motion that bylaw 2017-3370 to amend rates and Schedule A of City of Weyburn Refuge bylaw 2011-3188 be read third time and passed.
I'll second it, Your Worship.
Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. The next one is bylaw 2017-3371, the council procedures bylaw. First reading. Mr. Hardy.
Just, Your Worship, just wanted to review with council that administration has reviewed this draft bylaw, and council has been provided direction to staff at the November 27th Strategic Planning and Priorities meeting. Staff's recommendation is that council give this bylaw first reading at this evening's meeting, and then direct administration to advertise for the City of Weyburn public notice bylaw and bring it back to the January 8th regular council meeting for second and final readings.
You have a motion?
I wish to make that motion, Your Worship, that the bylaw 2017-3371 to be known as the City of Weyburn Council Procedure Bylaw be read a first time, and further that administration advertise as per City of Weyburn Public Notice Policy Bylaw 2003-2094 be brought back to the January 8th, 2018 regular council meeting for second and final reading.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Discussion? There's no discussion at that point. Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. At this point, no old business. New business. We have a Weyburn Golf Club request. Mr. Hardy.
Your Worship, in the council package is a request from the Weyburn Golf Club with respect to there were some initial discussions at one point with respect to the discussing the possible transfer of ownership to the City of Weyburn, which has been turned down by council. The correspondence indicates that the club is looking at the irrigation system being replaced in both the first back 9 and front 9 of their holes as a result of their, and as a result of their $20,000 a year repair costs that are escalating, indicating that they are looking for city support in terms of the provision of support in return for an interest-free loan in the amount of $900,000, where the golf club will put up their properties and buildings for collateral, and that the golf club will agree to make annual minimum payments of $20,000 or other additional payments based on their annual financial position. This proposal is being put forward, and the golf club has indicated that they're available to meet and discuss any aspect of this document at your earliest convenience. As it is a request for support from the city, this need to be brought to open council in terms of identifying that, but it's up to council in terms of where it would like to go from here.
Mr. Van Betju, comment.
Your Worship, I think we should probably table the motion, take this as information, and then get in touch with the golf course and further our discussions with them.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Would your permission to make a motion at such? Second. Discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. We then go on to Inquiries and announcements. Mr. Richards, you have one.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have two. One announcement. I would like to congratulate Twyla and Miriam and all the volunteers that brought together that Montreal Canadiens exhibition game a couple of Fridays ago, although the wrong team won. Most assuredly, our boys put forth a valiant effort that ended up with me with a Montreal Canadiens jersey on, and that's fine. My inquiry, I guess, of the city manager, who also, because he's a Habs fan, he's getting this question, and that's why. No, that's not fair to say. I just had a few folks in the community just inquiring how the construction at the water treatment plant was going, and if we're on schedule, on budget, on time, everything's going well, are we excited where we're at, and that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to the inquiry of Councillor Richards. The project is progressing. As we've been working through this, there have been a couple of minor glitches and bumps in the road, but those are not significant enough at this point to say anything. But we're on process and on project. I haven't received any change orders, which is anything that might change the budget for whatever reason, and won't expect anything coming until towards the end of the project as opposed to early in the project. But things are going well, and the assistant engineer can add anything in terms of what the progress is in particular elements of the project.
So the project is pretty much on schedule. We're about 2 weeks off of the original plan, so we're sitting in a very good spot as far as the schedule. And as of right now, they're pouring the base slab for the reservoir, and that will take a few months to complete.
And again, the weather has cooperated immensely for the pour of this. Any other inquiries?
No, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to congratulate those. I didn't get to see it, but all reports were that the Parade of Lights last week was tremendous, one of the best that we've seen in the city. So congratulations to, I believe, the Chamber's involved with that, with everybody else who participated. So I had it referred to as being better than the summer parade at our exhibition. So good on Chamber for keeping that alive, and it just looked good. On a personal note, I'd just like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas out there, and a safe one, and a happy, prosperous New Year.
Yeah,
If I could maybe add something to what Councillor Bailey said, especially with the Parade of Lights. If we continue to go downtown where we have no lights, it added quite a bit, Your Worship. I just thought I'd get that out. People have phoned me several times.
That's because the Montreal Canadiens were here. We turned out most of the lights.
That's why it looks so good.
Any other inquiries? The one that I'd like to, again, to our assistant engineer, do you have any update on our water meter change out? There's been a few, people have talked that there's been a few little glitches, minor glitches on some of the things there. What do you have an update on that one?
The water meter replacement project is over a quarter complete. We have over 1,000 water meters now installed, with a total of 3,900 water meters to install in total. So we are on schedule, and there have been a few minor bumps in the road, but we're addressing them as they come up.
And the application will, on the phone app, won't be available till March on that?
Yes, we're looking at having the app up and running once all the water meters have been installed. That way we can assure that everyone has an actual meter read on their water bill to coincide with the usage they're seeing on the app.
And the other thing is that it's up to the people to phone and make appointments to make sure that they get their meter changed out and be it so they're at home and they can get it done. And we urge people to go forward and get that, because it's going to be done and it's there. The other one are, how does our lead pipe going? Change out?
All 50 lead water line replacements have been complete. They were completed by December 1st, and the contractor will be back in the spring to do any surface repairs, so asphalt, concrete, that sort of thing, just to wrap up the project.
Any other further comments? There's one other one. This Friday at 5:45 is the holiday train will be coming in again at the usual spot over by CP. We would ask everyone, sounds like it's going to be a nice day for that we have everybody to bring out their children and adults alike to come and visit the holiday train as it pulls into town at 5:45 this year at the CP yards. There's no notice of motions. There's no committee of whole. And with that, we wish, for myself, on behalf of all the city council members, again, wish you a very Merry Christmas and best of the new year. This will be the last meeting that we're having this year until January 8th. And at that point in time, I shall call this meeting adjourned. Very good.